Begin by introducing you to some of the board members for each organization. On the end, we have Students for Life President Mirna Arrow and Secretary Christina LaPiccolo. So here we also have Voices for Choice President Aretha Frazier and Lauren Catoni as Treasurer. Lauren Catoni, the Treasurer, will begin the debate.
The main point of our group and our stance on abortion is that the person involved in the pregnancy should have the right to make their own decisions about their body. Basically, it's a debate between what qualifies as a person and what abortion is in relation to what a person should be able to do. While the fetus is technically human, I mean, it's human genetics, it is not a person. Personhood is subjective, and the pregnant person should be able to determine whether or not the fetus is what they would consider a person. And that kind of ranges over people who are pro-choice. Some people think that personhood begins when the fetus is viable. Some people think that it's a person the whole time, but the pregnant person should be able to choose. And that's basically one of our main points, is that the pregnant person should be able to determine what happens in their body, regardless of what you think about the fetus. And at what point does the fetus become a person more so than the pregnant person? That's kind of something that is subjective and depends on the individual's opinion. But even so, that does not make abortion wrong, and it does not make the pregnant person's decision wrong or something that they should be shamed for.
Right. So basically, bottom line is it is about we're using rather heteronormative language, normative language right now, but it's about the woman and her body and what she chooses. Whether you believe a fetus is a person or not, when does that person trump this fully grown, developed person and her bodily autonomy? When is she no longer allowed to decide the decisions made for herself, for her body, for her life? Again, we do not pretend to have all the answers. We do not pretend that it is cut and dry. But we do believe that before a very certain point, and people believe viability at 7 months, for sure, obviously 9 months when a fetus is rather fully developed and a baby at that point. Thank you. We do feel that, at that point it's probably the cutoff, but regardless, the whole time that a fetus is developing, we don't think it's right to tell a woman that she has to go through with something like this that affects her and her body and her life. It's about personhood, it's about the woman as a person, and not the fetus as a person.
That is time for Voices for Choice. We move on to the rebuttal for Students for Life.
Okay, so the first thing that you said, Lauren, was that people should have a right to their own body and to make decisions about their own body. And we fully agree, except when there's another person inside of a woman, then we believe that we know that there are two people there, and that it's not just the woman's decision. We're all for women's rights, but once it affects somebody else, that's where we draw the line. Because there are two people, and somebody else shouldn't make the decision to kill someone else like that. And so you also mentioned personhood and how it's so arbitrary. Well, have you ever met a human that's not a person? How does that even make sense? Has anybody here ever met a human that's not a person? And how can you say when a human becomes a person? There is no such thing. You are born a person. You are essentially a human. You have the essential being of being a human as soon as fertilization happens. And then the argument is flawed that personhood is this arbitrary thing, because you can fail to function as a person and yet you can still be a person. Like people under anesthesia and people under reversible comas are people who currently cannot reason and currently cannot form their own thoughts, but yet they have the essential being of being a person, and that's why they're human, so they are therefore people. And so the same thing goes to unborn children. because they are human, they are people. Even though, let's say, their brainwaves aren't currently functioning right now, they have the inherent capacity for them to function, and therefore they are human people. There is no such thing as being human and yet not a person. And we have seen this previously in our history. When there was slavery going on, we decided that black people are not human. When there was the Holocaust going on, Jewish people are not people. So you're putting this arbitrary definition of personhood that makes no sense.
Do we have more time? All right, I just wanted to add on to kind of further drive home the point Myrna was making. It just kind of surprised me that word for word you said, the fetus is technically human, but it's not a person. And as Myrna was saying, that makes no logical or scientific sense. You cannot be a human being without being a person. They're interchangeable. They are the same thing. There's no difference between the two. Also, Aretha, you mentioned something about
You have 30 seconds.
not being able to understand, or not agreeing with the fact that abortion happens at 9 months, but I fail to understand the difference between the fetus inside the mother's body at 9 months and 7 months, other than the size, level of dependency, and the degree of dependency on its mother. There's really no difference. There are changes that happen, but it's the same human being.
All right, Voices for Choice has 3 minutes to rebuttal.
Okay, so one, to address what we said about it being human, genetically human. Everything that we do, the saliva, the skin that falls off of you that turns into dust, it is genetically human. So we recognize that at conception, it is genetically human. That does not equal person, though. The formation of cells, that blastocyst, that is not a person at conception. That is that is what we talk about when we say personhood. Over time, a human develops, and it develops into a person. As I said, we don't pretend to have all of the answers, which is why we talked about at 9 months being different than maybe at 2. We know that at 9 months, that it has more of a capability to, at this point, for sure, be a person. We feel that a line has to be drawn at some point. This is why, like I said, it's not cut and dry. Some people feel that viability equals personhood. I'm not sure how I personally feel about that, but people, pro-life, pro-choice, whatever, viability marks something for people. It does not for me. So, but I do feel 9 months. That's something more definitive, makes more sense, and that's the difference. Is that is more than just this sort of developing being that doesn't have the capability to really be what I would consider to be a person that has a mind, a person that has the ability, that has rights, that should be afforded rights that trump my rights as a person, as a fully developed person, as my 21-year-old self. In terms of
something else that I wanted to address was your comparison to people in comas and situations like that. The difference is that they are not connected to another person. Their situation is not, it's just not a good comparison.
And I mean, you said there are 2 people. Again, that is subjective. If I choose to believe that this is another person inside of me and thus is immoral to end that life, then yeah. Then I would be immoral, then abortion should be wrong, but I don't agree with that. I do not believe that there are 2 people. I do not believe that at 7 months, at 3 months, that this thing forming inside of me is a person. And also, considering slavery and the Holocaust, yeah, there were laws that made legally my people less than human, that classified them as not a full person. And that was because of institutions and oppressions and ideals about superiority and inferiority. This here is about ideals about me and my personhood and what I should be able to do with myself and my body, considering that. This isn't about me trying to oppress another person, keep another person down, and to establishing laws that are completely arbitrary.
That's the end to the rebuttal, or response to the rebuttal. All right, next we will have Students for Life and their point.
Okay, so like you said, Lauren, human life does begin at fertilization. This is an indisputable fact. It's in medical textbooks, there's no way around it. Human life begins at fertilization. And that human life is a person at that moment. So you're bringing up all this arbitrary stuff about you don't know when it's going to be a person or not. It is a human person, and we'll talk about that later, but we do need to get to our point. So over 56 million babies have been killed from abortion ever since 1973. This is a form of discrimination against unborn children. Unborn children are no different than real people. They have a certain characteristics that distinguish them, and they are discriminated against, such as their size, their level of development, their level of dependency, as well as their environment. And I'm going to go briefly into this. So their size. Some of you are taller in the audience than each other. Does that make you more of a person? Second. So an unborn child in the room may not be as large as you, but is that a fair argument that that is not a person anymore just because of its size? Second, level of development. I'm more developed than my 6-year-old cousin. Does that make me more of a person than her? Same thing for the unborn child. That unborn child isn't as developed as I am. But does that mean that what is in the womb is not a person yet? Third, degree of dependency. My younger brother depends on my mother more than I do. Does that make my brother less of a human than me? And so that's the same thing for the unborn. They depend on their mothers more than newborn children, but does that make them less human, less of a person? No. And their environment. I like to think that I'm the same person whether I'm inside the Oakland Center or outside the Oakland Center. Same thing for unborn children. Do they magically become people once they exit the womb? How does that even make sense? And so you're seeing this form of discrimination against unborn children. The same type of discrimination that was put on people at during the Holocaust and during the slavery movement. It is a form of discrimination, and it may be a different form of discrimination, like you said, like superiority, but it's still discrimination. And so under Roe versus Wade, they use a legal definition of personhood that changes constantly, and it makes no sense because sometimes corporations have more rights than unborn children. How does that even make sense? So the law adjusts what personhood, what it wants it to be, and that doesn't even make sense. You are a person once you are human. You have the essential being of being a human person. There's no other factor that makes you a person. There is nothing else, or else it's just discrimination.
Well, we're moving on to Voices for Choices rebuttal.
Okay, so it seems as though your basic argument is that being a human, basically being living, makes you a person. So as we said, we realize that at conception, it is now developing, it is living, it is genetically human, and you're saying that that automatically gives you personhood. Again, we disagree with that. Personhood is subjective. You said that personhood has changed legally the definition many times. That is because it's subjective. And you're basically wanting for your ideal and what you believe to be a person, what you believe to be moral, to be what everybody else believes to be moral, what everybody else believes to be a person. And we just simply do not agree on that. If you want to compare discrimination, this isn't as though a person has decided that fetuses are, again, less than or based off some sort of prejudice and ideals against fetuses. Now we want to discriminate, we want to make them less so that we can do whatever we want to them. That is what happened in the Holocaust. That is what happened in slavery. We decided that these people, based off prejudice, based off ideals we had about them that were established, we decided that they were less than for whatever reason, and then enacted policies, and whether it was legal, whether it was just based off of culture, then we discriminated and we decided to oppress and keep people down. That is not at all what we're doing with fetuses. What we are saying is that these people, these grown women, like you addressing the issue of whether or not your little brother is less of a person than you, whether you being grown, it makes you more of a person than a child. Children, they have been born. They have gotten to a point where, like I said, the line in the sand has been drawn. At some point, you have to cut it off. Again, we do not pretend to know exactly when that is. We do not pretend to be perfect, but we feel that at some point, a fetus does become a person. And when a fetus that has been born now and is a 6-year-old person is a 21-year-old person. That is a human being that is now a person. A fetus at 2 months, at 3 months, at 7, no, it's not a person, and it should not trump my rights. I should not have to be pregnant if I don't want to. I should not have to have a baby if I don't want to, because me, the person, I should have that right. That's a basic right of mine, that whether I want to partake in that or not, I shouldn't have to. This is something that should be forced upon me.
Something else that you said that struck me was when you said corporations have more rights than the unborn. Corporations have more rights than people who are living, and that's a completely different issue. And also, when you talk about your brother or children, they could survive without the mother. They could, like, they don't need her to feed them off of her body.
And that is your time. Your response to the rebuttal?
I have a response to what Lauren just said. I was babysitting my cousins this weekend. One of them is 1 year old. If I just left him and let him go for the day, he would probably end up killing himself. So I'd like to argue that children, even after they're born, are still dependent on someone. So your degree of dependency does not change your value. It really does. That argument is not valid. I also wanted to talk about what Aretha was mentioning. We were talking about discrimination. And you kind of stated an argument for us when you said, in the past, different ethnicities and racial groups have been discriminated against based on institutions that oppress them based on their idea of how valuable they are. That is absolutely no different than what goes on with abortion today. It is no different, and I would challenge you to try to describe it otherwise. We are saying that the human being, because it's unborn and because it is in the woman's body and has become the woman's responsibility to protect that child, is less valuable. We are putting aside a certain population and we are saying they're less valuable. That is no different than what happened during slavery and the Holocaust. It's a genocide. We just don't see it. It's not up in our faces.
And you also mentioned how you don't think it's right that an unborn child should supersede your rights, but we're not saying that. We don't think an unborn child's rights should supersede your rights. We just think that the rights should be equal, that the unborn child should have a right to life just like you do. So that's what we mean by that. We don't think that an unborn child should supersede your rights, just have equal rights.
I also wanted to ask, just in your next response, I'm curious, you guys claim that you do believe that at some point a person is granted personhood, right? I'm challenging you to find out when, I want you to say when you believe someone receives personhood, because it's not clear. And you keep using the word subjective, which is really bothersome to me, because it's not subjective. It's based on science and it's based on logic. It's not based on your own. We can't keep separating the two, and we cannot keep separating personhood from humanhood. They're the same thing.
You still have a minute.
Okay.
You don't have to complete the minute if you don't want.
That's all right. I do want to talk, because we keep talking about the different months within the womb, the 9 months, the 7 months, and people are bothered by the late-term abortions that happen, and I understand, I'm bothered by it too, but I'm also bothered by the abortions that happen at 7 months, at 5 months, at 3 months, and at conception. So I'm not understanding why we're separating. As Marina was saying, there are differences, but those differences do not change the value of the life of that human being. So if we're going to have a problem with the 9-month abortion, we need to have a problem with the 7-month abortion and all the abortions before that, because logically and scientifically, it's all killing a human person.
So yeah, the main question is, when does a person become a person? That's what we want you guys to answer.
All right, and that brings us to the conclusion for that point. We go back to Voices for Choice, and their second point.
Okay, so before I get to my second point, I will answer your question, which I actually already have. I told you that I do not pretend to have all of the answers and that it is cut and dry. I do think that there is gray area, and I cannot say at this definitive point, it be a human is now a person. At this definitive point, this fetus is now a person, and I have no problem with that. That does not give me any pause, that does not make me lose any sleep at night. I just know that at some point it does become a person, and I'm not quite sure when that point is, but I do think that we need to have parameters established just so that things are not going overboard. And also, human beings, slaves, grown people that have been born, that were classified as less than human is not the same as saying this being that is not yet a person is not going to be born. And you saying that this thing that is not a person yet, that is inside of me, should be born regardless of whether I want to go through a pregnancy or not, is saying that those rights supersede mine. But our next point is that the conversation surrounding reproductive rights should be more about a need to reform access to resources and access to reproductive resources with the goal being to reduce unintended pregnancies. I am a person that my particular pro-choice is one that most people dislike. I find no issue with abortion. I do not have moral issues with it like some people do. Some people say I think it's wrong. I wouldn't have one, but I don't think I wouldn't take another woman's right away. We want to get to the point where no one has to get to this medical procedure. We want to get to the point where people are not put in situations where they have unintended pregnancies. That is happening more likely in poor women and minority women. Minority women typically tend to be more likely to be poor women. And this conversation around whether abortion is wrong and whether we need to take people's rights away really does take away from the real issue of why are women put in these positions? Why are women getting to the point where they have pregnancies or babies that they didn't intend to have in the first place? And it's about economics, it's about culture, so many different things that play into why women even have to make this sort of choice. We talk about not an easy choice. For some women, it is a rather easy choice. I know that scares many of you, but for a lot of people, it's not. I know for a lot of people that this is a very difficult decision if they ever have to get to the point of making an abortion. So we need to redirect the conversation towards making sure that nobody ever, or I don't think that it's going to be a place that nobody ever has to have an abortion, but that the numbers are drastically decreased and we rarely even have to think about it or talk about it at all. And that women don't have to have these conversations and have these feelings of unintended pregnancies.
Okay, that is your time. And for the rebuttal from Students for Life.
So we keep asking you the question, when do you believe that personhood should be granted to someone? And you keep kind of dancing around the idea by saying that, first of all, it's not cut and dry. And second of all, you say you don't have all the answers.
And that you should still put parameters even though you don't have these answers.
And if we don't have all the answers and we're not sure if the human being inside the womb is a person, then why would we be for abortion? If we were risking the chance that we're killing a human being, we would still be opposed to it. So this argument saying, I'm not sure, just doesn't cut it. It doesn't work out. You keep talking about how their rights are superseded, the unborn rights are superseding that of the mothers. We're not saying the unborn rights are more important than the mothers. We're saying they're equal. And that the mother, knowing that she has a human being inside her body, has the right to protect that human being. The baby is not more important than the mother. The baby is just as important as the mother. And about, in addition to you talking about reform and these issues that women face and moving the discussion more towards that, I agree with you 100%. I think there's a lot of reform that needs to be made. And we're not saying that it's easy to be pregnant. And we know women go through terrible things when they're pregnant, and we know that not everyone has a wonderful, glorious situation when they get pregnant. It's not all happy-go-lucky. We get that, and we agree with you. Something needs to be done about that. We just have a different idea of how it's to be done, and we think that abortion is a Band-Aid on a huge wound in our society that doesn't actually fix any problems. It actually makes it worse. So I'm going to go into my topic now that I'm done babbling. Abortion is not a women's right. It is a violent attack with many victims. First, as we have established, the human being in the womb that has its life taken away is a victim. The woman who has to deal with the emotional and physical harm caused by abortion is a victim. The fathers who suffered the loss of the children they may or may not have been given an opportunity to protect are a victim. The different racial and ethnic groups that we mentioned before that have been specifically targeted by the abortion industry are victims. Those who are aborted because they are disabled and labeled as less valuable members of our society are victims. There are no benefits to abortion. There are only casualties. The pro-choice community fights for a woman's right to decide whether or not her child should go on living. They proclaim themselves to be pro-woman. We would like to argue that abortion is the most anti-woman act that can occur. Many women describe their experience as a nightmare, which can hardly be equated with choice. 60% of women surveyed after abortion responded that part of them died. By giving women the option to abort the child, we are telling them, you are not strong enough, you are not capable enough, You cannot continue your education and be a mother. You cannot have a career and be a mother. I am pro-women, I am pro-life, because I believe strongly that women are powerful, capable, and strong enough to be able to overcome adversity.
That is time for Voices for Choice back. Now we have the response to Voice for Choice.
I would be interested in hearing where you got that statistic about how women react to abortion, because when I looked at things published by the American Psychological Association, the most common feeling was relief after. In addition to that, you say that we are dancing around the idea of when a fetus is a person, but you're dancing around the idea of everything. You just keep repeating yourself, and we are trying to hold a more informative conversation. When you say that the baby is just as important as the mother, what you're forgetting is that the fetus is the one who is affecting the woman in a way that the woman is not affecting the fetus. You say that pregnancy is horrible for some people, which is why they should have the option to not be pregnant.
Also, I want to address, I haven't danced around the issue. I don't think me saying that I know that is not cut and dry, that I know that at some point the line in the sand has to be drawn, but I'm not quite sure when that is. I don't think that's me dancing around the issue. I think that's actually me being very direct. That's me telling you exactly where my mind is and what I know. And I do not believe that's, if people feel like, okay, at 7 months, a fetus is more likely to be a person, so we should draw the line there, fine. You know, but I do feel that women should have the option to have abortion because, as you brought up, racial and ethnic groups that are targeted. There's actually no statistics supporting that Planned Parenthood or any other abortion clinics specifically target African American women, as is often noted, or Hispanic women. Actually, about only 9% of abortion clinics are located in areas that are half or more than half African American. Regardless of the fact, African American women are more likely, because of history and economic issues, to have unintended pregnancies, and that is why they are 5 times more likely than Caucasian women to have abortion. Hispanic women are 2 times more likely because of the situations that they are put in, because of history, because of institutions, because of economics. And again, that is why I feel like the conversation, we should be talking about how we should be talking about why they're put in these positions to have to make these choices. I am pro-woman. I'm all about the fact that she should have the decisions about her body, to make the decisions and the choices about her body. And you're saying that, you know, that you're saying that it's not superseding, that it's equal. It is superseding. If this thing that's not even a person yet, you know, again, this is subjective. You can say back and forth to me if you want to that it is a person. I don't agree with that. But if this being gets to live and develop in my body, and I have to do that, then that's superseding me and my rights and my choice to not be pregnant, to not go through that.
For that. We're going to now move to Students for Life's second point.
Okay, so you're saying, okay, so it is a human person, and you're not going to, I mean, you answered the question the way you answered it. You said you don't know, and, well, like I mentioned in my first speech, like, there really is no difference between an unborn child and us. Therefore, we are repeating ourselves because you're not understanding yet. That human life is being a human person. There's really no way around it. You cannot put a parameter on a human and say, oh, you're a person now, okay? 2 months later, you're a person now. 3 months later, no, now you're a person. Who are we to say when you become a person at a certain time? Like, what I mean by that is that you are a person automatically just by being human. There's no other way around it. You can't continue putting these parameters. Like, that's why discrimination happens.
I also find it to be incredibly disturbing that the pro-choice movement tries to paint this picture of pregnancy as an invasion. It's an invasion of the fetus. It's hurting the woman. It's attacking the woman. It's taking away the woman's rights, instead of thinking of it as this beautiful blessing that we're given in our life, and this miracle that happens, that the woman gets to bond with her child before it comes into this world. That's something that's special for women. Women get that. Sorry guys, you don't get to experience that. We do. And it's really, really cool. And I just think it's really sad that we live in a society that treats it like it's a plague and like it's a disease. And it's just, I don't know, it's just disturbing to me that we have this picture of it when it's something that I understand there's difficult circumstances and some pregnancies are difficult and there's ectopic pregnancies where the mother's life isn't in danger. And we understand that when the mother's life is at risk, then that's one situation where abortion, it needs to be an option because the woman's life is in danger. And who are we to say, as we were saying earlier, the woman's life is not superseding of the child, but the child's life does not supersede the mother's. They're equal.
You still have another minute.
I think Marina kind of touched on this, but I just wanted to say about dancing around the issue and being repetitive. I'm sorry for being repetitive, but we're really just trying to drive the point home that it's a human being no matter what, and that personhood is not separate from humanhood. And I know we keep repeating ourselves, but it's because we feel the need to, because people don't understand it. And it's something that's so simple, and it's based in science, and it's based in logic, but for whatever reason, people don't understand it. So if we keep repeating ourselves, we apologize, but our pro-life argument is very simple. And that's why we just need to drive those points home.
And we would never say that a child is invading us, like a 4-year-old son. You would never say, oh, my child is invading my life. But it's the same form of dependency. That child is still depending on you in the same way. So it really is no different. And you can say it may be different because they're living inside of you, but you still need to take care of that child because that child is yours.
Students for Life. Now we're going to reset for Voices for Choices.
Oh, I'm sorry. Response to the fact of the matter that it's not simple. You can say that this is simple, this is this. Humanhood is personhood. I disagree with you. And pro-choice people disagree with you. I simply disagree that being a human automatically makes you a person. That forming, that blastocyst, that conception automatically makes you a person. And I have no problems, I have no qualms with the fact that there is a gray area. Like you said, it's science. Personhood is not science. Humanhood is science. Science will tell you that it is genetically human at conception, that these cells, these are human. It will not tell you that this is a person, this is a mind, because I'm a psych major. I promise you, we're still confused about the mind. So I get that. And I'm fine with that. I have no issue with that, is the fact that it's not cut and dry, that I can't say this is a person, this is what makes a person at this point. But with what we have with science, with what we know about humans, I think that it is smart, and it is necessary to, again, draw those lines in the sand. At this point, this is now going too far. We need to draw some lines because, when it can't be a free-for-all. I get that. In terms of us painting it as some sort of invasion, I get that, we're taught and, life is beautiful and birth is beautiful, and it is. Many women enjoy their pregnancies, many women love that, and they do experience a bond, but it's also not the case for everybody, and that's just life, and that's okay. Get a little bit personal, I'm the birth of a drug addict, and I was supposed to be an abortion, but it was too late. I'm perfectly fine with that. I love the person that I am now, and but had I been aborted, I know circumstances, would have been a little bit different for my mother, for my family at the time. People have to make these difficult decisions because life is not simple. Life is not just beautiful. Pregnancy and birth and just life is not this wonderful thing, this blessing, if that's what you believe, on a woman, on a family. So, that's, again, all of that is subjective. That is if you believe that. If you believe that it's a blessing, if you believe that this is all beautiful all the time. If I'm the person who I don't want any children, I wouldn't want this, then yeah, I'm going to feel like it's an invasion in my body. And even if I don't feel that way, the fact of the matter is a fetus is a thing that's inside of me that has to, basically leech off of me, depend on me. And if I don't want that, if I'm not ready for that, then it should be my choice to not have to go through that. That is, if you want to talk about simple, that's all we're saying. That it is about the woman, it is about her and her choices. And that the fetus is not, until a certain point, a person, and then we can consider that. And then we can consider rights to life, and treating it as though it is a live, a born child or woman. Like I said, we just simply disagree with that. And it's all subjective.
Okay, so the reason why you can't answer when a person is a person is because personhood is made up. It really is. Like, you can't answer it because there's no such thing as when a person becomes a person. Like, okay, so we'll move on from that because we have been talking about this for a while now, but that really is why you can't answer it. So you were talking about how you should have the choice to go through with an abortion, but What is an abortion? What is it? It is ending the human life. I won't even use person here because if you guys don't feel comfortable with me saying person, it's ending a human life. When you end a human life, what is that considered? Killing. Why should somebody have the right to kill someone else in America today? Why? Why should that be an option?
I wanted to add, Aretha, I didn't know about your history. I really sincerely want to say that I'm glad your mom chose to keep you, and I'm glad that you're here with us today. And I know that life doesn't always seem like a blessing, and I know that everyone goes through different hardships and things, but in the end, I hope that anyone would say that despite all of those difficulties in life, they're still glad that they have that life. So I'm happy for anyone who's here with us today, and I'm sad for anyone who was not able to make it because unfortunately a quarter of our generation is not here today because they were aborted. Those could have been friends, those could have been classmates, those were sons and daughters and different people. That will never occur again. They had their own fingerprints, their hair color, their full genetic makeup, their DNA. They were human beings, and unfortunately they'll never be with us again. So I just wanted to say that I appreciate you sharing your story, but I'm sincerely glad that your mother did choose life.
And also, when you're talking about how it depends on how ready you are, when you're ready, you should be able to give birth if you want to. But what you're suggesting is that abortion is okay, and it really is not okay because, like we're saying, human life does begin at fertilization, and that is the scientific fact that nobody refutes. And since human life is formed at conception, then from that point on, we should value that human life, and we shouldn't say, oh, I'm not ready, because then you can go through with an adoption, or you can do other things other than killing someone else, because that just doesn't make sense. Let's say I didn't feel comfortable with my son, if I had a son, living in my house. I'm not ready to feed you right now, you know, I don't really want to. Do I have the right to kill my son? No. It's the same thing. You have 30 seconds.
Slow down. I did want to mention earlier, because Lauren did point out, one of the statistics I had actually would be a good book if anyone's interested to read, is directly from, I don't have the exact citation, but I can look it up for you and give it to you. It's from a book called Victims and Victors, and it's about women who have been through abortion or miscarriage, and it talks about the regret that they experience, and I thought it was interesting. You're talking about how women don't regret.
That's the time for the argument. All right, now we move into the 2-minute closing statements brought to you by both sides. We'll begin with Voices for Choice.
Okay, so basically our arguments amount to answer actually the question I just brought up here. Yes, we have no problem with abortion. We think that abortion is okay. We think that it is okay to end this life of a fetus, this being before it is a person. And we feel like it is more about the woman and her choice and her body and her right, and that the conversation needs to revolve around reform of access to reproductive resources, reform of access to things like sex ed, to contraceptives, all these different things that would reduce unintended pregnancy.
I would also like to add that in our argument, we do not think that abortion is the same thing as killing, and that adoption is not an alternative to pregnancy. Adoption is an alternative to parenthood. Being pregnant and being a parent are very separate things, and your comparisons between children that are alive are different from a fetus who is in a body. A child who is alive could survive outside of the woman's body, and a fetus could not.
Okay. Now we let Students for Life make a closing statement.
Again, just from what Lauren just said, I just want to further remind us that an infant outside of the mother's womb that is no longer a fetus and is in this world cannot take care of itself. It can't. It will die outside the mother's womb. It still needs its mother for a pretty long time. So we cannot argue that it's a person or a human depending on its dependency, because we're dependent in many different stages of our life. We're an embryo, a fetus, an infant, a toddler, a child, a teenager, an adult, and a senior citizen. You're a human being. You're constantly developing and changing, but you are never different from who you were at the moment of conception. And also, you said that being pregnant and being a parent are two different things. They're the same thing. They're simultaneous. They're the same thing. At the moment of conception, you are a parent. You're a parent, you have a child. It's not in the hospital when they're delivered and placed into your arms that they suddenly become a child and you suddenly become a mom or a dad. At the moment you find out that you've conceived a child, you know you're a parent.
And I feel like you're also straying away from the topic. You're not even arguing abortion anymore when you're talking about reproductive rights and all that, because we're talking about abortion right now, and we're talking about whether abortion is moral and whether abortion should be legal in the United States. So yeah, we can talk about other reproductive rights and all that good stuff at a different time, but right now we are discussing abortion, and we are discussing specifically the morality of abortion, and we have spoken about throughout the debate that human life does begin at fertilization, and that it really doesn't make sense to put personhood requirements on people. And you, even when you were talking, you mentioned this exact thing, before it is a person. Like you're saying that you don't know when a person's a person, and then you're just saying before it's a person. So it gets really messy. But at the end of the day, human life begins at fertilization, and we know it's a human person then, because what else is it otherwise? And that is our beliefs on abortion.